Guys, run here quickly! Run!
Imagine a friend of yours says, "I was in the forest today, and I saw a mammoth. Took a selfie with it." What would your first reaction be? You'd probably assume it's a good Photoshop job. Or a joke. We almost always laugh at things that don't fit into our personal experience. That's exactly how people reacted 100 or 200 years ago. Often laughing at stories that later turned out to be true. Long ago, sailors told stories about something rising from the depths. Not a ghost, not a storm, but a living creature. So massive, it could grab a ship by the hull. On shore, the response was simple: drink less. The sea is big, your imagination filled in the rest. No one believed them. Not because they were lying, but because people simply had no place for this in their picture of the world. This is a story about a legend that appeared long ago, and about a creature whose existence science was forced to acknowledge only recently. This story sounds like it came straight from the pages of Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In it, the submarine Nautilus is attacked by creatures from the deep, not just large, but so massive, they literally wrap themselves around the ship's hull. Jules Verne didn't guess the exact size, down to the centimeter. But in terms of scale, he got it right. And for the 19th century, that was almost audacious. Because officially, such creatures simply did not exist. So where did a 19th century writer get such a detailed description? Maybe he had heard stories from old sailors? For centuries, sailors told this legend. Not bloggers, not TikTokers, but people who actually lived at sea. They spoke of something enormous, living in the ocean, capable of sinking a ship, of a shadow beneath the water, far too large to be just a fish. In the legends, it was called the Kraken, a creature with huge, terrifying tentacles, up to 15 meters long. Sailors didn't know Latin names, so they didn't say giant squid. They said Kraken. They had simply seen something big, alive, and extremely dangerous, and tried to describe it in human language. Why didn't anyone believe them? How do you prove it? No photos, no video, no body, only witnesses. Exhausted people who had spent months at sea. For science, that wasn't enough. For skeptics, even less. But over time, details began to appear that science could no longer ignore. They were small and deeply inconvenient. For example, sperm whales. Enormous whales that looked as if they were constantly getting into fights. Their skin bore round, perfectly shaped scars. Not from teeth, not from rocks, but from something with gigantic, plate-sized suckers. Something that really didn't want to let go. That was strange. Because a sperm whale is not a weak animal. It dives more than a kilometer deep. It hunts where it's dark, cold, and the pressure would crush a human instantly. And if even it shows signs of struggle, then down there must be something very big. At this point, science still didn't believe in the Kraken. But it had stopped laughing. Because sometimes, legends aren't fiction. They're just stories that arrived too early. When did the abyss stop being silent, and science finally say, yes, it exists? The problem with the ocean isn't that we're afraid to go deep. The problem is that the ocean is very convincing when it says, "You're not welcome here." At 250 meters, there's almost no light. At 1 kilometer, the darkness is so deep that even a nightmare would take a break. The pressure? Imagine an elephant jumping on you, and 10 more standing on top of it. Without special protection, your body would simply stop being a body. It would, let's say, melt into the ocean. That's why we know less about the ocean than about space. Space is cold and scary too. But launching a satellite is easier than descending to the depths, where the real owners of the abyss live. And here's the key point. The giant squid wasn't hiding from humans with evil intent. It simply lived where we physically couldn't see it. For a long time, scientists had only indirect evidence. Scars on sperm whales, huge squid beaks found in whale stomachs, and a sea of questions. Until one day, the ocean made an exception. In 1992, a giant squid washed ashore on Long Beach near Kameji, South Africa. This was no longer drawings or stories. It could be weighed, measured, examined under a microscope. And at that point, no one was laughing. Science had to say it out loud. The giant squid exists. And it's really big. Not kind of big. Not a largish squid. With tentacles over 10 meters long. Eyes the size of a soccer ball. Suckers that aren't just sticky. They're like small hooks that dig into flesh. Then came a new round of evidence for skeptics. 2002, the first live giant squid observed near the surface, Japan. 2004, the first photographs of a live giant squid in its natural habitat. So should we be afraid to swim now? Let's not exaggerate. This is not a horror movie monster. It doesn't hunt humans out of malice. It doesn't attack ships because it's angry at the world. It lives at great depths. And does what it has done for millions of years. Lives, hunts, avoids danger. And its main danger is the sperm whale. A sperm whale is an underwater tank. It dives kilometers deep, navigates total darkness using echolocation, and regularly fights giant squids. That's why its body bears round scars, marks of hugs. That would be fatal for almost anyone else. Besides sperm whales, does anything threaten the giant squid? Sharks and orcas, maybe. But they're smaller predators. Unlikely to want those hugs. The kisses from giant squid suckers would definitely not be pleasant. They won't pick a fight with a squid at depth. If they meet one, they'll most likely just swim around it. And here's an interesting question. What if sperm whales didn't exist? Pure speculation, but logical. Without a natural enemy, giant squids might have become bolder. They might have risen higher, more often, and humanity would have learned about them earlier. Maybe too early. Imagine diverse and armored diving suits, metal helmets, and a cannon in their hands. Romantic, in a very specific way. But reality is different. The giant squid is not a conqueror. It's a resident of its own world. Darkness, cold, and crushing pressure are its natural environment. Down there, it is the master. How many of them are there? Honestly, we don't know. There are estimates, models, indirect calculations. But counting creatures that live a kilometer deep is like counting shadows at night. Let's return to the beginning. The Kraken didn't exist because people wanted to believe in monsters. It existed because the world turned out to be bigger than we thought. And now, one more surprise. Today, science knows that sailors weren't seeing just one Imaginary monster. We know the giant squid. And there's also the colossal squid. Shorter in length, but heavier in mass. The largest invertebrate on the planet. So reality turned out to be no less strange than the legends. Jules Verne wasn't a prophet. He simply allowed himself to take seriously what others dismissed as nonsense. The strangest thing in this story is not that something huge lives in the depths. The strangest thing is how little we still know about our own world. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It just waits patiently until we're ready to hear it.